Hello, and welcome to Bung 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 Bung.
No,
Doof Me-
no. Fuck's sake, we've had this
No.
argument. It's Bring Me a Dream. We can't call it Bung 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 because
Okay.
nobody will know what that is unless they're
Yeah, if this gets picked up for series, we'll be in trouble, I guess.
Yeah. Look, this is Bring Me a Dream. I'm just going to take the wheel now.
Yeah.
This is Doof Media's dive into Neil Gaiman's The Sandman series. I'm Elliot Diebold.
And I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And this is a pilot for our pilot season. So special thanks definitely to SomeRagamuffin who donated during All Packed Up to make this episode possible.
Yeah, if you like this show and you want to see it continue, we have a feedback form that's linked in the show notes down below. So leave your feedback there, let us know whether you like this, and we'll potentially pick it up for series. Now on to the show.
Yes.
Bung, 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 bung. That's the transition music.
Yeah, hopefully we can get the rights to that.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be fine.
Yes, so we'll be covering the first half of Volume 1 today. And so we open with Issue 1, Sleep of the Just. And this first issue opens with us meeting Roderick Burgess, who's like the head of this magic society sort of thing, and he gets the last ingredient he needs for a ritual with which he wants to summon death. Basically, his idea is he's going to summon death and like extort death or something to get, rich and powerful, or something like that. He kind of messes it up though, and instead accidentally summons Dream, aka the Sandman.
Yeah, and so I guess we should point out that we write our notes as we go through each issue so that they're not spoiled by future stuff.
Yeah.
And it only really hit me how different this issue is to the other three that we're talking about after I started the second one, because it's so different. It's really gothic horror, and it's quite... I mean, it doesn't feature our protagonist, Mr. Sandman, at all, right?
I think he's in it a little bit towards the end when he escapes.
Yeah, I mean, he's...
But he's not the or the main character of this first issue.
Yeah, in fact, the characters that we meet in this issue, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that we're never going to see them again. It basically just sets this really horrifying tone for what this story is going to be. It's really interesting.
Yeah, like, I agree. It stood out to me as well that the series was called Sandman, and he's barely in the first issue. But, like, he's a central topic. But
yes, but it's not about him. It kind of sets... It is important because it does set the stage for what is the initial conflict in the story, which is he has to basically regain his power from being trapped for 70 years.
Yeah.
And okay, let's talk about that as well. This takes place over 70 years. It really is just like a very interesting, strange story, right?
Yeah. It's like halfway between a chapter 1 and a prologue, because it's not quite a prologue because it's like tied into the Sandman story, but it's also mostly the story of the Burgess family and their fall due to like their own hubris. Like, I think a really fun part of all this is like essentially the conceit of the chapter here is also the issue is that the sect failed. Like, they wanted to summon death. Something that Dream says here is that he is like way lower than death. He's like, oh geez, good thing you didn't summon death or you'd be really fucked.
They're
still way out of their depth as well. I like this as a way of setting like Sandman up as someone who is very powerful and like this immortal being, but also not like God. Like, he's not as powerful as death, so we're not getting sidled with this protagonist who's kind of completely, omnipotent and immortal. It's like someone who is immortal, yes, but, they're like mid-tier immortal, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting. The Burgess family are so out of their depth because even this Sandman is such... Like, they are so unable to do anything, even though they more or less succeed at summoning a very powerful entity. They just completely fuck up. Like, of course he can't bargain with them. Like, he just doesn't, and they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, imagine if they had gotten death. They'd be completely fucked.
Yeah, they and the world would be completely fucked. Because the other thing that happens here is, like, stuff goes real bad for the world while Mr. Sandman is away.
Yeah, well, yeah, let's get into that. So what sort of happens next is over 70 years, the Burgess family kind of has imprisoned the Sandman, and they're attempting to negotiate with him, and it doesn't work at all. In the meantime, the sort of physical treasures that they stole off him when they summoned him get nicked from them. That'll come back into being important in a few issues. But basically, one of the other things that happened is, as you said, a number of individuals around the world get stuck in these weird dream states, which they eventually sort of jump out of as the Sandman finally manages to escape after one of his captors makes a mistake 70 years later.
Yeah. And he exacts a terrible revenge on Alex, who is the son of Roderick, his name was, right?
Yes, who argues his own innocence in a way I did not find particularly convincing myself.
Oh yeah, it is not compelling. Like, his defense is basically, I knew you were captive down there, but I didn't do anything about it, so I'm innocent.
Yeah, well, yeah, his argument is, I was a kid when you were captured. I wasn't responsible for capturing you. I've only been in charge of keeping you imprisoned for the last 30 years. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not compelling evidence, I didn't think.
No, me either. But yeah, something...
and the punishment that he exacts on him is he traps him in an eternal waking up, which is horrible. It's like he wakes up as if from a nightmare, and then it's like, oh, I'm awake, and then is still in a nightmare. Like, he just wakes into new nightmares constantly, which is a real torture, and it's something that I was surprised by how cruel it is. Like, the Sandman is clearly... He is a terrifying being, capable of quite cruel torments.
Yeah, and he's not here to fuck spiders. It's like, because that's a bit of a trope, I think. The whole, the character wakes up and then something horrifying happens, and then they wake up again. And it's usually something I don't like when stories do, but the idea of like weaponizing a bad trope into something where I was like, oh my god, it's horrible. Not only does he have to live through a terrible trope, but it's like in a nightmare situation for forever.
Where each time you wake up, the person's there to help you and their face just fucking melts off again.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fun. There's a lot of horrifying stuff in this series already that we'll get into.
Yes,
but to sort of circle back a bit, something that you mentioned before, I'm still a little bit confused by what happens to everyone when he's called Morpheus in later issues. I'm going to start calling him Morpheus. When he was imprisoned, it's like, so he seems to have responsibility for dreams and like responsibility for and be the incarnation of like dreams, and it maybe even like imagination or the subconscious. Like I'm a little unclear of exactly what his boundaries are now, which I think is intentional. And I'm liking that, but what confuses me are these... So all throughout this first issue, we're kind of cutting back. Every time the story jumps forward, we get this really neat thing where we go into, I think it's 3 patients who have gone catatonic while he was in prison. And it's a really cool way to...
in different ways.
Yes, and it's a really cool way to show us, or to keep us grounded as the issue jumps forward, like decades at a time, because it can sort of take us back to, hey, that person was a young girl, now they're an old woman, type thing. But it just kind of left me confused, because I was like, okay, so if the whole concept of dreams has sort of died off or whatever, why is this only affecting this handful of people? Like, if death was captured and no one could die, that would completely change everything. If no one can dream or imagine or be subconsciously thinking or whatever, like, it should have been much more wide-reaching. So
yeah, I had the same thought. I'm not 100% sure why it was just these people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's something that hasn't been explained at this point, is why this group of characters... And like, it's just weird now we're 4 issues in, I'm starting to wonder, will it be explained? Or
yeah, I don't know if it will. It feels like the kind of thing where it's just kind of done as this is the scene being set, and these are kind of giving you hints at what the world is missing out on now that Mr. Sandman is imprisoned.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. If everyone's meant to be cut off from it, it should have been, I think, a much bigger deal.
Yes.
Maybe this will make sense to me more once we have a deeper understanding of what exactly the bounds of Morpheus's domain are, because like, I think they're intentionally still a little bit fuzzy, like what he extends to.
I actually think the whole story is a bit like this. This issue especially has this very intentionally kind of dreamlike and a bit confusing. Like, it feels like you're never quite spoon-fed what is happening. You're given, 75% of the picture, and you have to kind of infer, oh, this is clearly what it has happened in this 25% that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like the feeling of trying to remember a dream after you've just woken up, which I guess is intentional, right? Of like,
yeah,
you've got these beats of a story and you're kind of like, wait, but then this happened next? Oh yeah, that makes sense. So it must have been that. It does feel intentionally very, I don't know, gothic, confusing kind of vibe.
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be like I just kind of want to learn more, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Which is a good hook that's been
Yeah,
baited, right?
that's true. Like I think this does really well as a first issue to kind of get you very interested and invested in the world, and it kind of also makes sense that I think something like even after these 4 issues, that's still quite vague to us. And if it was like a human protagonist, I might start to get annoyed that this person we were dropped in halfway through their life and they weren't thinking or explaining themselves.
Yeah.
But Morpheus is seemingly this immortal who just kind of drifts through time. So it does kind of make sense that like he doesn't think about everything he could be thinking about because there's probably too much.
Yeah, totally.
And immortals also in general, especially in these the bits of comic book lore that I've seen, they're usually terrible at explaining themselves about these sorts of things anyway. So,
yeah,
he's just doing that to us because that's how he thinks.
Yeah, and I think that's backed up by future issues, as his thought process is clearly a bit absurd.
Yeah, and reactive. He's
Yes.
very he just sort of reacts to what's happening to him so far.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so moving on to issue 2, which is entitled Imperfect Hosts. And this issue as well isn't quite centered on Sandman, but
yes.
it's
somewhat
it's
more
around,
centered on him.
Yeah. But we also kind of hone in on Cain and Abel. From in this, it's called the first story, but Cain and Abel from the biblical story.
Mm-hmm.
And basically they have a pet gargoyle who brings in like a weakened Sandman to their house. So this is just after he's escaped from the Burgess household and used the last of his power to stick Alex in a eternal torment because that's what he felt was worth the last of his power. So bit of characterization there.
Good way to spend it.
Anyway, so it turns out the Cain and Abel are like employees of the Sandman, and so they help him start to recover some of his strength.
Yeah, and the tone of this issue is very different to the first issue.
Yeah.
And I think the tone of this issue is what the rest of the issues kind of keep to in terms of tone, where it's still horrifying and there's definitely moments of horror, but it's very much like black comedy, I guess. For example, the dynamic between Cain and Abel is where Cain just basically keeps murdering Abel over and over for minor slights. And so Abel is this kind of beaten down younger brother, while Cain is this kind of horrifying monster who seems to have some affection for his brother, but will also just murder him for small inconveniences.
Yes, it's definitely a dynamic that was equal parts funny and upsetting to me, is how I would describe it.
Yeah.
There's like an emotionally abusive angle to their relationship that's very uncomfortable, but then like was played for comedy beats, which like I did laugh at, so I was a bit all over the place with it. I mean, especially the ending, I think. So
the ending is wild.
The last page of this issue is Abel coming back to life after one of the times Cain has killed him, and going up to this little pet gargoyle that Cain has given him, and telling it this secret story he has about like an older brother who's nice and never murders the younger brother, and it's just kind of
it's really heartbreaking. Yeah. And it's crazy.
Like, oh my god. Wait, I hope these two come back, because it feels like they've started something here and I have absolutely no idea what the fuck it is, and so I need to see the rest of it.
Yeah, it's really wild. And the fact that we're able to feel so much for this character just by only meeting him, at the start of this issue. I mean, sure, these characters exist in the consciousness, but all I really know about Cain and Abel is brothers who one murdered the other, and that's not really required knowledge for this story. It's a testament to the strength of this, that it's able to so masterfully make you feel the things that it's trying to make you feel.
Yeah. And then obviously I think the other thing we really start to do in this issue is a lot of cool world building. like not just around Cain and Abel and this idea that they're like the employees of Sandman, but
Mm.
we start to see more of the dream world this issue. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a bit, but like there's a reference to a Raven woman, and we see like a brief silhouette of her, and it's just, and then we just move on to other things. Like there's tons of what I feel like a seeds of world building being planted,
or just kind of seeds of the atmosphere of the dream world, you know?
yeah. Like she might, the
Yeah.
Raven woman might come back. She might not. Either
There
way,
were-
like it was good here.
I liked the hag who had taken the form of Madonna at one point.
Yep.
Just, yeah, I mean, it just seemingly this witch that taps into, I guess, the public consciousness to shape itself, which is cool.
Yeah. But again, like it's this whole thing, like Cain and Abel being in the dream world. What does that mean for the bounds?
Yeah, I kind of started getting the picture of it's not dreams per se as it is like stories possibly that are what really define Mr. Sandman's, I don't know, area of reach, you know?
His domain.
Yeah.
Although I'd also use that word for the dream world, so but it is the embodiment of these things, so maybe we should use the same word for both.
Yes. It is kind of abstract, right?
The concepts of like he captures people daydreaming in the first issue, so it almost feels like it's just imagination in general, whether that's subconscious or conscious imagination.
Yeah.
Which I guess would imply Cain and Abel were made up in this.
How dare you, Elliot?
So yeah, I don't know.
You're going to be excommunicated with talk like that. Yeah, no, I think so. And I think Neil Gaiman is probably doing that intentionally.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, so we'll get to there's some stuff that explicitly ties this to DC Comics coming up, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I want to talk about, this podcast is obviously an audio medium, so we can't adequately show what some of these panels look like. But there's a lot of really interesting, like panel layouts being done here. There's one that I really liked, where as Mr. Sandman is approaching the gates to his dream world, he walks basically across this big desert. And the way that the comics kind of show this scale is these like concentric circular panels that are slowly approaching the inner circle, which is where the gates are. And we get this weird feeling of the immense scale that is being portrayed by this strange panel layout. And I thought it was really interesting. And this issue, this whole series, does a lot of those interesting panel layouts that I think are very cool.
Yeah, I would agree that I definitely got the sense that this series was getting a lot out of its format by like toying with it and trying new things with it. For those of you who've listened to some Media MD, like it's come up on there how that like I'm just kind of bad at comics. And I'll admit that a lot of these things that you've mentioned threw me for a bit. Like there's actually a couple of instances where like both pages are one panel. And so like the bottom half of both pages will just be one picture.
Yes.
And then like you're meant to read the four pictures at the top on both pages before going to the bottom half of the page.
Yeah.
And like I didn't do that, and I had to read that page twice.
There are a few that got me like that as well, where I wasn't quite sure of the order I'm meant to be reading things in. There's like two little panels inside a big panel and then two other little panels inside that panel, and you're like, hold on, I'll read this twice to kind of get it. I'll read it once and it'll be disjointed, and then I'll put the puzzle pieces back together and read it again.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've sort of talked about how I find it difficult to maintain my momentum when reading when I encountered that. But
yes,
for most of these ones, as you said, it was such cool things like the circle one, because there was usually a reason for it. Once I'd put those puzzle pieces together, it actually kind of forced me to stop and take a second to be like, I see how they're integrating the art and the story here. That's really cool.
It is cool, and it does have that weird effect where it kind of stumbles you for a bit, but then you get it's almost like making you stop and consider it more deeply. It's weird.
Yeah.
And it also adds to this like kind of semi-confusing vibe that is just how the Sandman operates.
Yeah, exactly. So like whereas in other comics I've just found it kind of momentum breaking. In this one I found, like as you said, it was forcing me to stop and kind of smell the roses, so to speak.
Yeah.
And like I actually really liked that. I kind of got into the comic format for the first time ever, like reading this series, which was cool.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, back to the world of Mr. Sandman. He starts to recover like somewhat at Cain and Abel's place by absorbing his contracts with them, which maybe that'll be a plot point later.
Mm-hmm.
And he then uses that power to finish his journey to like the center of his dream world, which is where his castle was, because he comes back and he finds it's like dilapidated, it's rotting. The who I assume is the caretaker is still there and basically explains to him that in the 70 years he's gone, this entire dream world has kind of fallen apart, centered around his castle. And so Morpheus realizes he's going to have to go. Well, he needs to regain his power to rebuild this place to what it was. And to do that, he needs to find the 3 things he had on him when he was captured that were stolen from him, because he put a lot of his personal power into them. So without them, he can't get strong enough to rebuild this place. So with that in mind, he summons the 3 fates who will help him, figure out where they are.
Yeah, the 3 fates are interesting, right? They're similar to the fates as you would know them from Greek mythology, but they also just kind of flit in between other types of 3 fate tropes. It's a very kind of trope-aware representation of them. So they'll kind of take the forms of witches, a la Macbeth, or kind of Greek fates or Celtic fates, or even they reference a band called the Supremes, which is like an old girl group, which is like the kind of band that the Fates in Hercules were parodying. So it's this very interesting setup of these fates just being, and similar to Morpheus, being concepts that have kind of been shaped into human form rather than as strict definitions of the fates as we would see in Greek mythology or whatever.
Yeah, this is a particularly poignant example of why I think it was that SomeRagamuffin decided we should read this series after Pact. Not to go into Pact spoilers in case people are coming without this, but like these general ideas of symbolism being important to the structure of the world is quite similar.
Yeah, and I think it is cool to explore this in ways that a comic would explore them, right? Because this is a visual medium where you can get these weird visually offbeat things that wouldn't necessarily work in other visual mediums like TV, right? Where these fates are shifting between forms to represent their kind of unity. While they're 3 fates, they're really just one entity, kind of, and it's like ways of representing that visually that would work in comics but wouldn't work in a movie, for example, or a TV show.
Yeah, like there's one where, like, the one on the right, no, it's the left. One of them is eating this like little frog monster that they pull out of their pocket, and it's really cool because it changes which one it is in each panel. So about the first one pulls it out, then in the next one, a different one who is in that same left position is then eating it, and then in the last panel, it's the third one who's now in the left position who's like burping, having finished eating it, and it's this really cool way of like adding to the idea that they're rotating by saying, just so we're clear, it's not that they're like, spinning around the orb
or anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like they are sort of transmuting between forms.
And can you imagine how that just wouldn't work? If I'm trying to picture how they would do that in a TV show, it would just fail. Like, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah, you could try and do it with like shots that are cutting between them, but it would feel disjointed, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. Anyway, so the 3 fates tell Morpheus kind of where his objects are. Being immortals, they can't just give you a straight answer.
Yeah, they do fuck with him in a way that I found quite funny.
So John Constantine has his pouch of sand. A demon has acquired his helm, which is like this weird, like ood-like.
It's like a gas mask almost as well.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah. And then the Justice League has his magical ruby crystal thing. I forget what the actual term for it is. Anyway, so Morpheus decides that his best bet is to head off and find the pouch, because that's only being guarded by one human. How hard could it be? Which I think is a fun joke for like people familiar with Constantine, and who know what a massive pain in the arse he is.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fact that suddenly Constantine and the Justice League appear in this story. Yeah, were you expecting that, Elliot?
No, I actually had no idea. Like, until the Constantine panel came up, and I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. And then it's like 2 panels later, it's like the Justice League, and I was like, Okay, so this is just full on DC.
No, because what it was for me was there's a thing that's seeded earlier on, something that's being seeded for later is this guy called Dr. Destiny, I think it is. And we first see him in this issue where he's in Arkham Asylum, and I saw that and I was like, oh, that's just a funny coincidence that this place, that Neil Gaiman also called his mental asylum Arkham Asylum. I mean, that could be whatever, that's fine. And then Constantine shows up and I'm like, okay, hold the phone. What's going on here?
I actually didn't notice the Arkham thing until my second
nice.
read through, and that was one of those like, oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
For me, it was like when the Justice League, I was like, so this is just an actual DC thing.
So I've looked into this a bit. So basically, this is published by an imprint, like a sub-publisher of DC called DC Vertigo, which was a thing that they ran for a while. I think it closed down in like 2015 maybe, or 16, that would be doing kind of darker and more adult-focused DC Universe stuff. But it also kind of became the place where people would do kind of more creative output. So I'd call it analogous to like an Adult Swim versus a Cartoon Network,
that's sort of the vibe I was getting, like this idea of where the creators have the freedom to kind of experiment a bit more and dip into the properties owned by DC,
yes,
but with less of the pressures and restrictions of being officially DC branded.
Yeah, and making it so that they didn't have to worry about it having the right continuity or crossing over and stuff. I think.
Right.
I think that as the story of Sandman progressed, the continuity stuff I think became a bit more restricting, and so I think it gets dialed down a bit later on. But at least initially, it seems to play into this a lot. We see the Justice League. John Constantine is a major character in the next issue. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It gives it this interesting flavor because we know DC continuity from like the Arrowverse stuff and Young Justice and whatever. So I don't know. It's fun to. It's a weird beat that I wasn't expecting, but it does add some interesting flavor to this pilot, I think.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, like I wouldn't classify myself as a DC expert, but they've been all over our screens for the last 10 years, so it's hard not to have picked up like a fair chunk. Yeah. I mean, I don't read comics, so maybe I'm mischaracterizing things here, but I kind of feel like I can see why something like this feels like it can cross into things like the Justice League or whatever, because the thing about like DC and Marvel continuities is like they're a bit of a massive clusterfuck anyway. So it's like, you don't have to be, you get things like Young Justice, which are just like, yeah, we're in a different universe or whatever, so we can have the Justice League, but it's our own interpretation of them. Yeah. And I'm sure that's what's going to be happening, like, here. Like, I doubt this is, the Justice League that is in the Justice League comics.
Well, I think it's close to that, but the fact that it's all dreamscape stuff, I think made it easier to cross over. Like, if you just interact with, I don't know, the Green Lantern's dreams, that doesn't need to play into continuity because it's just his dreams. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just have a panel in one of his comics where he's sleeping, and you've completed the crossover.
Crossover done. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So speaking of meeting our DC characters, let's go into it. With issue 3, Dream a Little Dream of Me. So this issue is just sort of more explicitly from the perspective of John Constantine.
Yeah.
Who basically has this old witch warn him that the Sandman has returned, and she knows he has Sandman's pouch. So she's like, hey, he's going to come and get you. Be ready. And, because it's John Constantine, he's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll worry about that. And then he forgets too.
Well, he kind of researches it for a day and a half and then gets distracted.
No, he barely even researches it. He was like, he makes a mental note that he should research it, and then gets distracted, and then sure enough, the Sandman shows up, and he's like, you were
I forgot about
on my
that.
to-do list. Yeah. Which, I mean, like, just to sort of clarify, I was a huge fan of the Constantine TV show that was very short-lived a while ago, and have been very much enjoying his resurgence in Legends, so I'm a big fan of the character for someone who's never read the comics or seen the movie.
You're a big Constantine, we call them.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I really liked this issue. Like, it felt like we're starting to approach this is what the standard issues will feel like. The first 2 issues were the introduction and setting the stage, and now we're kind of getting into the the monster of the week style stuff, I guess you would call it. And it's not like crazy. There's some horrifying stuff in here. There's some good character work. It's some plot advancement. Like, it's fun. I'm kind of calibrating, like, okay, this is what I would expect the average issue to be like, and it's a pretty good high bar. So it gives me good hopes for this series.
Yeah, like, I haven't read that many comics. I think the ones you've given me as well on MediaMD have been particularly serialized. So internally, I've been comparing issues to episodes of a TV show.
Yeah.
And like, you're right. That's sort of the feeling. Like, I kind of feel like we've gone from the pilot, which was more more built around like the orientation, and then this is a bit of our first taste of here's what a standalone episode can be.
Yeah.
I think maybe the next issue is probably going to be more akin to what they all are, mostly because it actually centers around the Sandman.
Sure, that's fair.
More than anything, but you're right. This is the first. Like, the other two felt like they were orienting us in the world. This one feels like, okay, now let's do things. We actually move the plot forward rather than tell you what it is.
Yeah.
So Constantine tries to help Morpheus find the sort of pouch of sand, and then sort of realizes it must have been stolen by this ex-girlfriend he had, who was a junkie and had this incident where she, like, basically robbed him and took a bunch of his stuff, and he realizes the pouch must have been amongst it. So the two of them go to her home, which has sort of been subsumed by dreams released from the pouch that have run amok.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Stuff goes bad. Like, there was a guy who tried to break into this house and got trapped in an eternal dream. The girl's dad got, like, turned inside out and is still alive, but is now like coating the walls of a hallway in their house. Like, it's really gory and messed up stuff.
Yeah, I've only seen someone paint the walls like that and been alive in one other work, and
yes,
it was
and
equally.
We shall not discuss that here.
Yeah, so you're right. Like, there's a lot of really fucked up stuff in this whole series. And I kind of like it. Like, it's really setting the stage of like how important all this stuff is, because when things are going wrong here, like, people's lives are getting really fucked up.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of useful to show us that while he is not as important as death, for example, he clearly is powerful and important. And the fact that he's been away for 7 years has fucked with a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. When these things are tipped off of balance, it still messes things up.
Yeah, it's pretty horrifying.
But yeah, so you mentioned, like, there's a guy in here who sort of broke in, and we're only mentioning it now, but it's actually like it's like the first page of the issue is actually him breaking in, and there's like another one halfway through, and like, this is something I noticed this series does a lot of. Like, it did the same thing with the patients in the first issue.
Yes.
Cain and Abel actually sort of dip in and out of the second. It's a really interesting, like, storytelling approach. Again, sometimes I found it a little jarring because like, the difference between like a sort of scene break in these situations and like, sometimes I wasn't sure exactly where we'd cut to, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, it's usually, or in this one at least, it's this thing of, we don't actually understand who this person is that we're cutting to until the end, and it's like, oh, he broke into this house. That explains it. And I think it's a way for it to kind of have some things take place that will tie in without them kind of immediately presenting themselves to Mr. Sandman, who it seems powerful enough to basically just resolve things he comes across straight away.
Yeah, at least at this point. No, like, yeah, I really like it. As a device like that, like the idea of that moment where you realize, oh shit, this is the guy who was breaking in that I'd kind of forgot about because he was only in one page.
It's before. Like a little mini twist, not a twist, but just kind of a like, oh moment,
Yeah, exactly. It's good, like, episodic content.
Yeah.
I just, like, I did find, and again, it's probably just because I'm like a bit of a noob at comics, but like sometimes I'd turn the page and it would take me, reading a few panels to be like, oh wait, no, this is a different scene. Whereas, I guess in TV and film, you have like the soundtrack and different lengths of black screen to help you mentally make that transition without thinking. So it's just something I've got to get better at.
I feel it too, and I'm I don't think I'm a huge comic reader, but I have read more comics than you have. I do think it is a skill that needs practice. And I think that's one of the reasons why this is a pilot that I'd be quite interested to see what would happen if we started diving really deeply into these issues if it gets taken to series, because like it kind of reminds me of how when we were doing Deep Impact, or I've heard Scott and Matt say similar things about Worm and Ward, it's a different skill set to dive into these things as deeply. And it's kind of interesting to me, the idea of what would happen if we did that with a comic book. I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah, that's true. Because I definitely, I don't know if we should really be getting into this here, but I guess I'm doing it.
Why not?
Like, I got a lot better at reading and interpreting as we did Deep Impact, I think. Like, there's been someone on our Discord recently who's been going through Pact and has been listening to our show and commenting on it and doing her own video series as she's been going. And it's been really fun. But like listening to what she says about what we said at the start of Pact, I've been like, oh, I think we actually got a lot better towards the end. Or maybe not a lot better. Like I'm not saying we're experts now, but I think there was a marked difference.
Can say it.
I think there was a marked difference in the quality early on and the quality later.
Yeah.
And like I think it'd be really interesting to sort of start back at ground zero again a bit with me being terrible at reading comics and sort of start to learn how to read
for a new piece of media.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, just a little tangent, I guess.
Yeah.
If you want more of that, order this to series.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's be honest, no matter what you order to series, you're going to get dumb tangents.
That's true.
Yes, so we move into issue 4, which is called A Hope in Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we said, this is now our issue where we dive into Morpheus as a character, really for the first time, I'd say. He's now got the power of his pocket sand, and he's brave enough to enter hell in order to try and cover the helm that one of the demons of hell has acquired.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of goes to these gates of hell, which are just very pleasant, and he meets this demon called Etrigan.
Yes, Etrigan.
Who I googled because the way he introduces himself and the way his art style just
really stood out to me as well.
Anything else in this issue, I was like, this guy has to be a character.
He looks so fucking goofy. It's bizarre. And like, I googled Etrigan as well because I had this same moment of like, he looks like he's wearing fucking spandex, right?
Yeah, he looks like, it looks like if you were writing a gritty Sandman comic and you were forced to include someone from like 1950s comics.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, I looked up Etrigan and he has more modern designs that are more in line with these modern stylings of what a demon would be. And so it is just the creators of this comic being like, let's make him look as goofy as fucking possible, which I think is such a bold move, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It was kind of the first time he came in, I was like,
why the fuck does he look like this? Yeah, he's like popping bright reds and greens and shit,
and yellow. Like he's these really bright primary colors, and like he's amongst these pictures of like a hellscape, which is just all these kind of very like tan, dirt brown bodies being like murdered and stuff.
Yeah, and Mr. Sandman himself is like incredibly pale greys and blacks.
Yeah. But like that said, after the initial shock, I did just kind of buy him in the world. Like, so
totally,
and
we learn that hell is quite bombastic anyway, so it kind of works out.
Yeah, I guess with Lucifer at the helm, you're going to get some visually interesting aspects to the place, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So we get into this world, and the first thing that they go past is something called the Woods of Suicide, and we get like these 3 lines as we're introduced. Well, even before we know it's the Woods of Suicide, we get these 3 lines from this tree with a man's face that talks about the situation that led to his life being terrible. And then Mr. Sandman says this throwaway line of like, oh gosh, the Woods of Suicide have really gotten bigger, huh? And Etrigan's like, yeah, anyway, let's keep going. And they just leave it behind. And it's this moment of such powerful writing of, there are 3 lines that this guy has, and my heart like shatters for this person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good little snippet of storytelling telling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one single panel with this tree in it, and then another one where Sandman does that throwaway line, and instantly you put this whole puzzle together that just breaks your heart.
Yeah, it's real bad. It's rough.
Yeah.
And it continues, of course. Etrigan seems to take Mr. Sandman through this circuitous route that takes him past these jails of imprisoned souls, and somebody recognizes him. And he does this thing that he's been doing before of like shifting his form, but he shifts his form to interact with this person in the form that they recognize of him. And he basically condemns them to continued torment. And it's this weird moment of, we've kind of started to slide into seeing Mr. Sandman as the hero of this story because he's our protagonist and we just kind of fall into his morality. But it's clear that he is not a good hero. Like, he's not good, right? He's got this strange morality, like not evil, but kind of neutral, like very strange neutral morality. And I'm really excited to learn more about what fuels him and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, part of it feels like that kind of detached immortal trope.
Yes.
Like, he's a bit of a, like, yeah, I don't know, like, he's just immortal and he's just kind of going through things. Like, it'll be interesting to see if this person ever comes up, because it seems like we don't know the story here. They betrayed Sandman somehow, apparently.
Yeah.
And if he can forgive them, they get out of hell, and he refuses to do.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting, like, if this person comes back, and they might not, like, because
I doubt this person specifically will come back, but I suspect we'll see more people like this that played a role in his past, and through that we find out more about it.
Yeah, that's fair, because this is already, as you said, it's done its job of establishing him as someone who is not necessarily a hero as we would think of them.
He could, with no effort, let this person get out of hell, and he chooses not to.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know what they did. Maybe they deserve it.
Sure, but
maybe we'll find out. Maybe not. But like, either way,
eternal torture. So it's like,
yeah, the heroic thing to do would probably be to forgive them, especially since I think they say they've been down there for thousands of years. Like, it'd have to be pretty fucking bad, whatever they did, for you to still talk about keeping them imprisoned. Anyway, yeah, so sorry, as you sort of said, Etrigan is kind of taking Sandman on this sort of scenic route, but eventually they get to like Sandman's old mate's place, Lucifer. The Morning Star. And this is where I think we start to get an idea of what I think the themes of the overall story might be, but I guess we'll get there in a bit. Basically, Lucifer is like, oh yeah, sure, I'll help you find your helm. I just need to gather my mates, because it turns out hell is no longer just run by Lucifer. Some stuff has gone on in the last 70 years, and it's now a triumvirate. So it's Beelzebub and Azazel, who are two other characters. One of them's a fly, which was neat.
Beelzebub, yes, is a giant, disgusting fly.
So that was just fun. Anyway, and so the three of them kind of agree to help him find his helm. But it really sort of strikes the Sandman that such a big change has gone on here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to start talking about this, but the theme that you brought up here is change and evolution, right? Things changing.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just bringing Pact over, like, again,
I'm about to bring one up that feels very Pact as well.
Oh, yeah, so, like, light spoilers for Pact thematically, but again, I'm not sure if it's me bringing Pact everywhere with me, or if this is why SomeRagamuffin chose this, but there's a ton of stuff in this issue that made me think we were talking a lot about the fact that Sandman is not changing. He explicitly in this issue kind of says he doesn't think he's changed. He's not forgiving this other person. He's baffled that hell's changing. His plan is just to build the dream world back to what it was. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he starts to become challenged to change his ways or something. Like, I don't know. It's just like the seeds I'm starting to see being planted in this issue is this idea of change is important even for immortals, and he's not doing that right now.
Yes, I think I want to dive a bit deeper into that and talk about the idea of, like, the perceptions of humanity being the catalyst for change, because that's the theme that I feel like I'm starting to get here. Or even in the early issues, we get I mentioned offhand the woman who changed her form to look like a Madonna hag, basically. And I think that's the thing that I'm starting to see run through this, is the idea of, like, human consciousness being the thing that shapes the immortals around it. Obviously, Mr. Sandman has been trapped in a seal for 70 years and so hasn't been able to be affected. But I do think that's the through line of what we're going to start to see is he doesn't just give stories to humans, is he feeds off of them. And like, the consciousness as well, right?
I mean, yeah, that was a very interesting thing that jumped out to me as well. Is if he is someone who is dreams and hopes and imagination, or whatever exactly.
Yes.
However much each of those individually apply to him, because we're still not sure. It's weird to me that he would be so disconnected from the evolution of humanity's thoughts and trends. So I wonder if that's going to be a thing. It's like there's a certain irony that the immortal that we are following, who is meant to learn about how humanity can change things, is going to be the one who is inspired by their changing thoughts.
Yes.
I don't know. I guess we'll see if that is a thing and if it's going anywhere. It feels like it is from this issue.
I agree. It feels like that's the place we're starting to get to, which is themes that I really enjoyed in Pact, so I'm going to enjoy them here too.
Exactly. Something we should also call out, this is again touching on the visual nature of some of the stuff here. And maybe this is common and I'm just showing off like how bad I am at comics again, but I really like how everything Morpheus, that the Sandman says, is in a dialogue box that has the colors inverted.
Yes.
Like he's a black text box with white text. And it reminds me of in like Discworld, how everything Death says is in all caps and in a funny font.
Discworld or Good Omens, which is partially written by Neil Gaiman.
Yep, true. It really adds this sort of ethereal sense to the Sandman.
Yes.
And as well, like just from a practical standpoint, it saves them having to attach the text bubbles to his mouth.
Yeah, which is also very helpful.
They can just stick them everywhere and we know that that's the protagonist, which is fun. I kind of brought it up here as well because we've just met Lucifer. And Lucifer gets his own font as well when he speaks, which I thought was fun, and again gives him this sort of gravitas.
Yeah, and it adds this character, right? Like it is a font that you would expect a Bible website made in the 2000s to have on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a very ancient-y font.
Yes.
I completely agree. I mean, like, just to sort of leap off of this, something like we probably haven't given enough thought or given enough airtime to is it's so strange, I think, to center your series around one of these like big immortals. Like, most series, they center around the young hero or someone entering the world. Like it is a very bold choice to have the protagonist of your story be like in a close to all powerful immortal. Like, I guess jumping ahead a little bit, 4 issues in, he's already got like 66% of his power back.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed when he lost his 3 things, I was like, oh, okay, so the whole story is going to be him rising back to power. It's clear that he's probably going to get most of his power back fairly quickly. And so then, I'm interested to see where you go from there, because usually your protagonist is not one of the, 50 most powerful things in the universe, right? Like, it can be hard to make interesting stories out of that.
Well, yeah, not at the start of the story, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is going, like, we're halfway through volume 1. I think there's like over 8 volumes or something. So, if he goes back to being an all-powerful immortal, like 1 volume in,
where does the story go next?
Yeah, like I'm kind of fascinated. Like it's a really interesting choice, and I'm glad then in retrospect, I'm glad they're not just going like Neil didn't go, oh, he's an all-powerful immortal, but not for the whole time we're with him. He's like an up-and-comer.
Why would that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to get... like, it seems like very soon we're going to have him back at power, and that's going to be a really interesting type of story to tell, I think, because you don't see those too often, probably because they're quite hard.
Yeah.
But if I trust anyone with them, Neil Gaiman would be one of those people.
Totally. I also compare episodes or issues to TV episodes, right? And so the first volume of this is 8 episodes, and that's the first arc of story.
Yeah, first season, if we're into the TV metaphor,
Yeah, so I, in my head, was just, once we got to this point, I was like, oh, wait, he's getting these back really quickly. Like, the first volume is probably just that, and then what happens next? I had that exact same thought of, like, what happens next? And I have no idea, but I am excited to see that perspective, because it's not a story that you get that much, the story of an immortal being forced to self-assess and decide what he wants to do with his life. Like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of down with that.
Yeah, and what do you do with them once they've sort of started to do that character arc? Like, I think it's going to be really fun to see how you challenge
Yes.
a being like this, not just from a character growth perspective, but like in text, how do you add stakes that matter to them within that?
Yeah.
Especially because, you know, like the other answer I've seen fairly common is like, Doctor Who often will target the companions, and Superman does the same thing, right? You don't target Superman half the time. You target like civilians.
You target Lois, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Sandman doesn't really seem to have anyone he gives a shit about.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I'm really interested to see where it goes.
Yeah. But let's finish this issue before we do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to it, Beelzebub, Azazel, and Lucifer gather every single demon in hell. And Morpheus, and there's a great, like, it's just one picture, but it's 2 pages, and it's kind of all the demons, just a bit of visual flair.
Yeah. It would be so fun to draw that and just being like, now what would this random demon look like?
Like, you can just imagine the artist was told, can you fill 2 pages with whatever the fuck demons? And pretend
just
it's all of them?
Draw a bunch of fucking demons, go nuts.
Yeah, exactly. Go wild. So anyway, Morpheus, uses his pocket sand to figure out which one has his helmet. But because of the rules of hell, is forced to kind of challenge him to a game. And we transition into this really cool, like, game show bit.
Yeah.
It's just a little fun stylistic thing.
This whole thing is so stylistic, right? Because this demon, whose name is Choronzon, like, does this weird transition where it gets really, like, burlesque and strange.
Yeah, it's just a really fun, like, again, it's them using the medium really well.
Totally.
It's a very fun visual part.
Yeah.
So they engage in this battle, which is just really fun. It's like a sort of children's game you'd play where you say, like,
exactly.
oh, I'm a dog, and it's like, oh, well, I'm a wolf that eats dogs, and it's like, yeah, well, I'm now a cart that runs over wolves,
and I'm like a broken stone that ruins the axle of the car.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those little fun, like, one-upsmanship type games, and there's all this fun silhouette art going on while they do it. It's really fun. Dream eventually wins by managing to say that he is hope, and that kind of defeats everything that the demon can think of, because
the demon can't think of anything. Yeah. Exactly. He wins because he is the embodiment of creativity and stories, right? So you picked the wrong game for this encounter, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's an even more sort of boss moment follow up to this, which is then Morpheus is like, cool, I got my helmet, I'm gonna go. And Lucifer's like, nah, we've got literally every demon in hell here. Why would we let you leave? And Morpheus is like, because you can't kill me, because hope is as important to hell as anywhere else. Because without hope of somewhere like heaven, what does the torture of souls mean? And then they're just kind of forced to let him out. And it's like, okay, well, you're endorsing hell, which is not great, but it's a very powerful moment. So, like, I kind of loved it.
Yeah, and this continues the theme of his morality to me, because a lot of the power that we've seen in the first, this first half of this volume has been people being trapped in nightmares. Like, nightmares has been the theme, right?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like it's Morpheus's power weaponized, so we've seen a lot of it.
Exactly, but here we see the flip side to this, which is dreams are hopes and aspirations, right? And that's a part of what makes up Mr. Sandman as well. So it's not just the nightmares, it's actually these aspirational, like, lifelong dreams that you hold really deep in your heart, and presumably he embodies these aspects too. So it sets up this really weird alien morality to him that, I'm just excited to see more of.
Yeah, it's like ideas can be good or bad. It's what you're doing with them. Like, you know, it's not a coincidence that the first time we see them weaponized for good is when he's fighting hell.
Yeah, sure. Because by contrast, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be an interesting aspect to all this. I mean, where we go from here is basically we kind of get 2 pages worth of teasers to finish off this issue. It was a great place for us to stop our coverage here because, first of all, we get a page where Lucifer basically watches Morpheus leave and says to Beelzebub and Azazel that he's going to get him and kill him one day, which is interesting because Morpheus seems to think of him as one of his few friends.
I mean, that's what
Lucifer's-
it's like when you're that powerful, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, I assume that we'll be back to hell at some point in the story. But then we also then get our second page, and it's our last page, which is a teaser for what I assume is the very next issue, which is we've been seeing little snippets of Dr. Destiny locked up in Arkham Asylum, which we already mentioned. And he gets what I think is like Morpheus's ruby of power back, which was taken from him by the Justice League. Somehow he seems to have gotten it back. And so I assume he's going to be escaping and pretty powerful when Morpheus gets in touch with him next issue.
Yeah. But we'll have to wait until next episode, maybe, for that, because that's the end of our coverage here on Bung 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 Bung.
No, that's the end of our coverage on Bring Me a Dream.
We changed it, sorry, yes.
We didn't change it. It was never Bung 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 Bung.
No, because it's like the lyrics of Mr. Sandman,
yeah,
which
so
is referenced explicitly in the story.
Yeah, it is. John Constantine sings it.
There are a lot of dream-themed songs that are playing on the radio in that chapter.
Yeah, they have. Like, we kind of skipped over it, but there's a whole bit at the start where Constantine's questioning his sanity, and it's because like Sandman's chasing him down. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's good.
We entirely skipped over the bit where Constantine gets sucked into those weaponized dreams in the house, and thinks he's falling to his death, and Morpheus just kind of pulls him out, and it's like, "Oh, it wasn't real. Get over it."
Yeah.
Sort of putting his empathy right on display.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, we skipped over the whole bit where like we find the woman who's like dying.
Yeah.
And Morpheus is just like, yeah, she's gonna die. It's gonna be really painful. And then he like goes to leave, and Constantine's like, well, can you help?
Can you do something? Yeah. And he
and
can't,
sort of
but he puts her out of her misery, I guess.
Well, yeah, he doesn't save her life, but he makes it so she doesn't die in agony.
Yeah.
He did have to be pressured into doing that. So again, like interesting aspect to his character.
Okay, but then the flip side to that is a few times he just will, like, someone will have a problem. Like Constantine has a problem. He says to him at the end of that issue, "Oh, I haven't been able to sleep well for a while," and Mr. Sandman's like, "I fixed it. Good luck. Have a good night," basically. And so he displays this moment of like genuinely going out of his way, almost unprompted, to just help someone out. Because why not?
Yeah, but it's that very sort of immortal tropey thing again, where it's like it's the people he knows. Like, he doesn't care for the wider universe or the mortals in general because, they're just mortals. Whereas when he's interacted with one, like he formed a bit of a relationship with Constantine and he feels like he owes him a favor. So he does it. And it's like, what we need is that to extend to, hey, all the mortals matter, like maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's one part where he travels by going through the dreams of a dog. Does that count as something?
I think that was a utility rather than any form of empathy.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's that. Sorry, that is the end of our coverage of these first 4 arcs, finishing on arc issue 3 as we want to do. But yeah.
Yeah, if you liked this show, I won't say its name. If you like this show and you want to see more of it, you can leave your feedback down in the form in the description, which is, I mean, we're still going to make the decision ourselves, but, have your say and let us know what you thought, and that will impact what we decide to do next with these pilots.
Yeah, definitely. The 3 metrics we're sort of using are the number of downloads and how many people listen, so spread the word if you like it.
Yep.
The results of the Google form will also be important for us sort of seeing how much people who engage with us actually like them. And then the third metric will be like kind of how interested we are. So spread the word and fill out that form and get your friends to fill out the form if you really like this episode in particular or any of the others.
Yep.
We're also available on the Doof Discord, and we're taking feedback very directly in person, kind of. Well, I mean, as in person as things are these days.
Yeah, that's true. To get access to that Discord, you just need to be a patron of the Doof Media Patreon at patreon.com/Doof Media. Any old level will do. Literally give us the minimum amount you possibly can, and you'll still get that Discord because that's just how nice we are. No abstract alien morality here.
And that is the best perk of the Discord. In fact, just to plug another one, at the $5 level, you get access to the Doof and Chill sessions. which this week is a Portal 2 race.
Yes.
So Ruben and I will be racing Matt and Scott, and other patrons have already submitted some times. We haven't announced the time that we will be doing our race with Matt and Scott.
Is it an exclusive?
No, we'll be making it public. We just haven't.
No, I mean we can announce it. We can have the early access exclusive because we decided when it was today.
No, not everyone has actually said they can make that time.
Shit, sorry.
Whoopsies. No. So hopefully very soon. Maybe by the time this is out, even we will have the time announced. But with sort of the way everyone now kind of has a bit more flexibility in their schedules, we're actually going to try and get all four of us on the stream at once, which should be
that'll be
fun.
Yeah, it'll be a real mess. Thanks again to SomeRagamuffin for donating to our live stream to get this episode to happen. It was a great one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So we'll see. Hopefully it's the one that gets carried forward. But of course, they can't all win. Only one can survive. Or, I mean, we haven't really decided that. I guess we could do 8 new shows, but we probably won't.
We're probably going to be doing one at a time. So, it's like if it's not first, the ship hasn't completely sailed.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, and so on that note, we'll see you all next week as we dive into another comic, Stay Still, Stay Silent. And I'm really excited for this one because we're actually going to try doing it as a visual episode. So as well as publishing the audio copy wherever you're listening to this, we're actually going to stream a visual one on YouTube, actually referencing panels of the webcomic and all that. So that should be really fun. So come check it out on YouTube if you like.
Yes, I'm sure that will be a fun one too. But let's wrap this episode up, Elliot, with our traditional goodbye that we say at the end of every episode of Bung 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 Bung. And that, of course, is, take it away.
I'm sleepy.